No, this will not be a touchy-feely discussion about relationships and so on, families and all sizes and shapes and things like that. It's really talking about the relationships between our entities as we do this code first development using entity framework, right? So POCO, right? We talked about that plain old CLR object. That's the style of classes that we're writing here. So you notice that you sometimes will get into trouble if you try to do the getters and setters the way you have with some other courses in the past. We want to use the data annotations approach because that also gives information to the client browser without having to go back to the server on validation that can be done right there at that time. But getting back to the relationships involved, I just want to talk about that a little bit here. We've made mention of it, it's been explained in the past, but I've put this PowerPoint together. Eventually we'll work through the whole thing. I'm just going to use the first couple slides here to summarize information that I said has been covered already, but I want to give you this reference, and later on we'll be looking at more and more different types of relationships and how we set them up using this particular approach that we're learning in the course, right? Okay, so start with the basic assumption, unless I note otherwise, every entity model we're doing is going to have that integer identity primary key. Usually I prefer just the name ID as opposed to the class name ID. That sometimes helps, especially if you start inheriting one model from another class and so on, right? Anyone recognize the picture? No? Don't blame me. I took that with my cell phone. I was on a training course with Microsoft in Seattle, and I was just looking out of the window from the Microsoft building in downtown Seattle there. That's not part of their campus. That's separately in a different area. Anyway, all right, moving forward. One to many, okay? We've talked about two situations briefly, but let's just formalize the discussion. More often than not, the parent is required in the one-to-many relationship, and we build it this way. I'm going to use this example of province and city, right? Something we're very familiar with. So a province has many cities. The city is in one province, right? So how do we build that? Well, essentially, as I've mentioned before, it's the province object we put as a property inside the city class. That's what establishes this one-to-many relationship. And if that's the only property we had in here, it would work, right? Now, what happens in the background is the fact that it will actually, inside the model, it will create, okay, this foreign key based on the data type of the primary key in province. So assuming, as we have, that the province has an integer identity primary key called ID, then putting an integer province ID inside of the city, it will assume, okay, well, that's going to be the value we'll use as the foreign key. And that's actually what gets saved in the database, right? This province object, well, that doesn't get saved in the database. It's just the integer province ID, right, which corresponds to the ID of the province that is the parent of the particular city involved, right? Okay, just to review then, we often, okay, typically will add this I collection of the child object, okay, inside of the parent. And that allows us to do basically a dot include. And that's one reason I'm reviewing this information right now, is we're in our next exercise that we're going to do in our medical office demo, we're going to be utilizing dot include in the parent so that when we go and get a particular parent object, in our case a doctor, we can include all the patients for that doctor, right? And display them on the screen. Okay, so that's the most typical case. Now, what is different between that where the parent object is required, right, is that we can have it optional, okay? So, we can create an employee without specifying the department in this case, right? So this is another one-to-many department has many employees. Employee is in one department, but might not be assigned to any department, right? This might be the case. You might have a floating employee that isn't assigned to any one department, right? Might spend this week working in some department, next week working in a different one. They aren't assigned to anybody. So at that point in time, we don't want to have a requirement. There must be a department ID assigned. And in that case, all we really do, the only real change is we make that foreign key integer, okay, the int ID, right? So department ID int, a nullable integer. And that allows the parent to be optional so we can have an employee not assigned to any department. Well, that's as far as we're going to go in the discussion of these relationships. As we go through more and more examples, we look at other slides that are in this PowerPoint, but I might as well just give you the whole deck at this point in time. All right, so let's get into our actual demo where we look at using, in particular, the .include in the parent so that we can actually access all the child records.